Hey everyone, I'm recording just a very quick little video introduction to this week's assignment. I tried to write it out all clearly that people would understand, but I thought maybe this would help some people to have a video introduction. So everything for this week is based around this book that I have linked here and down here. And it's by this man, Peter Frace, I believe. It's called Four Futures: Life After Capitalism. And it came out a few years ago. And if we read this part here, he basically focuses on a few things that he sees as true about the future. One is that capitalism is bound to end, that something else is bound to replace it. And that, in some ways, just seems like a historical argument. I think that's part of what he says, that capitalism isn't that old historically, and economic systems have always progressed. So it seems as if we'll have something post-capitalism at some point. And then he talks about technological and climate change being two other factors that seem to be inevitable to some extent at this point, right? And so climate change threatens our very existence in many ways. It certainly threatens, like what were we talking about just in the past, couple of years. We find out so much of the coastal cities in the United States might in a number of decades be either uninhabitable or only inhabitable by the very wealthy. Things like that seem to be inevitable changes that will have to shape our world. And then, of course, with technological changes and increased automation, there are certain jobs that will continue to go away, we believe. Maybe certain things, I guess this goes along with that, things that people used to do that'll now be done by computers and different new technologies. And just how will that shape our economy and our day-to-day lives? So anyway, he looks at all those things, and he comes up with four different possible futures, and he calls them communism, rentism, socialism, and exterminism. And two of these, the first two, communism and rentism, involve an abundance of resources and goods, food, technology, clothing, housing, things like that. And somewhere, I believe in the introduction, he talks a lot about sort of like replicators on Star Trek, if you've ever seen an episode of Star Trek. And he just points to something like that. Like eventually, perhaps technologically, we'll be able to meet the needs of everyone. And so those are these two sort of, I guess, futures of abundance. And then there's two features of scarcity, socialism and exterminism here. And that's a situation where the technology doesn't keep up with climate change and growing inequality and things like that. And there just aren't that many resources in the world. There aren't enough for everyone who is here. And so in both of these, though, there's a further split between equality and hierarchy. So basically, he imagines these four outcomes. One in which we can have equality and abundance. One in which we can have an abundance, but there's a vast sort of differentiation between who has what. And so the wealthy and a wealthy elite have everything they need, and poorer people, I think in this case, are not starving or anything, but they have much less than those at the top. And then we have equality and scarcity. So there isn't very much in the world, but it's divided fairly equally. And then sort of the worst possible future, we have very little resources to go around, and they're distributed very unevenly. And so the assignment this week is to read this introduction, where he covers all of these pretty well. Let me go back to the week. So yeah, first you're supposed to read just the introduction, and then our flip grid for the week is about that introduction. Basically, it asks you to talk about the very premises he starts with about changes in the environment. I would add automation and the end of capitalism. And then which of these four things do you think is most likely to happen and why? So that is your post for the week. And then respond to another student by the end of the week, of course. And then the next thing to do after the flip grid is to read the chapter. And when I say read, you can kind of skim through it. You don't have to read every word, though I think this is kind of easy to read. But anyway, yeah, read the chapter of the four, whichever of the four outcomes you picked. So there's a chapter on communism, socialism, rentism, and exterminism. Although I wrote extremism here, I'll have to change that. So read the chapter of the future that you picked, and then basically write a few paragraphs, that's what this says, about why you picked what you picked and what you think that future will look like. how will we get there, either in a positive or a negative way, that sort of thing. So really, yeah, this whole week is just thinking about this book and what our future might look like going forward, and which of these four outcomes, or certainly you could talk about some other outcome if you can think of one, just sort of where are we going and how are we going to get there. I'm very interested to see what you all put together this week.